everybody, and welcome to another Florida-friendly landscaping educational program. Today, I have my special guest and friend and master gardener, Bernie Bathauer. Bernie has been a master gardener for about 17 years with Hernando County Extension, and almost every single Thursday of those 17 years, not counting lockdown time, he has been available at the in-person plant clinic at Hernando County Extension. And as all master gardeners and all people in general, you learn by doing. So, I know Bernie, well, actually, he and I took the same master gardener training course at the same time, but all master gardeners know you learn a little bit during the course. You learn a lot when you try to help other people. So he's had 17 years of that, and his favorite topics are turf and citrus. But today we're going to talk about turf. So we're going to have turf talk with Bernie. So, let me get my thing to move there. I am Lilly Browning. I'm the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program Coordinator. I work for Hernando County Utilities in the water department. And believe me, turf is our biggest water user. Actually, that is not true. People use more water on turf than anything else. And that's why I brought Bernie in to help us kind of learn how much water it needs and everything else that it needs. If you have any questions or would like a PDF copy of this program, my email is LillyB, Lill, 2 L's, YB at hernandocounty.us, and I'm going to have Bernie's email at the end if you want to contact him directly. Here are the 9 principles of Florida friendly landscaping. When we're talking about turf, we can use almost every one of these, except maybe number 5, unless we talk about a freedom lawn, which does attract wildlife, but that's another topic. So let's get started with Bernie. We're going to talk about the 2 main turf types that we have here in Hernando County. I might throw a little bit about Zoysia Grass, which is pretty popular in the villages, but in general, if you are here in Hernando County, you are going to have probably Floratam, St. Augustine grass, or you have Bathauer grass. So, Bernie, what can you tell us about Floratam and the new grass that I've been hearing about, the new St. Augustine called Citra Blue?
Well, Floratam, it was a joint effort between the Texas A&M and the University of Florida. So the combine the 2 names and you get Floratam, which stands for the universities. It's a grass that does reasonably well, has a lot of problems, needs fairly decent care, and unfortunately, there aren't a lot of things that grow in Florida. Before we cover grass, let me do a quick explanation. When people first came to the New World, they brought livestock. The livestock did not do well on the native grasses. They were very poor nutritional, and they brought their own grass seed from Europe, and those grasses tended to take over. They were cold weather grasses, and everything in the north became a European grass, and it fed the cattle and did very, very well. The cities became very, very dumpy. The people didn't have yards. All the houses were built with the front of the house right at the sidewalk or the street, and there was no grass. If you had grass, you would have to have somebody cut it, and there were no lawnmowers. So it took somebody that was very proficient with a scythe to mow the grass, and it was just such a big problem. People didn't have grass. In the mid 1800s, Better Homes and Gardens magazine started a big campaign and said, we need to clean up the cities, get rid of all the trash on the vacant lots, cut the grasses down, put grass where it's bare, and improve things. And it worked, and it did it for several reasons. One, people were tired of living in filth, and second, having grass was kind of a thing where the people in Europe had cows, pigs, and chickens in their front yard, except for the Earl and the Duke, and they didn't have all these things. They were able to have somebody go out and mow the grass with a scythe and take care of it. So grass was an in-your-face thing, saying, I am so wealthy, I don't have to have livestock in my front yard. Since most of these people were European immigrants, they loved the idea. It made them as good as the aristocracy in Europe. So things worked very well. It wasn't until the railroads went in that people started coming to Florida. They got off the train in Florida. They looked, there was no grass anywhere. And they started screaming, we need grass. So 150 years ago, the need for grass in Florida started to arise. When you look at a globe, Florida is about 28 degrees north latitude. If you go around the globe, no place on Earth is there any grass growing that's suitable for a lawn at 28 degrees. It's just amazing. The temperature and the humidity and everything we have just precluded lawn type grasses. The native grass of Florida was a little bunch grass called wiregrass, isn't capable of making a lawn. So we started from scratch 150 years ago, trying to produce something that they had been growing for thousands of years in Europe. The University of Florida and several other universities in the state started doing things, and unfortunately, 150 years is just not enough to modify the genetics of a plant so that it's perfectly happy here. So St. Augustine is one of our first modifications of a grass growing someplace else to make it grow here. And it's reasonably successful if you give it a lot of care. Unfortunately, the people that come here were used to being able to go out and throw a handful of bluegrass seed on the yard and have a lawn overnight. That does not work that way in Florida. So if you have Floratam, you need to learn what Floratam requires, how to take care of it, how to recognize the problems that it has, and operate so that this thing, it becomes an asset to your home rather than the liability that most people think Florida grasses are. Citra Blue is a new St. Augustine derivative that supposedly has fewer diseases, can be cut a little shorter. It appears that it's going to be a nicer grass for homes. Unfortunately, they've had these thoughts before and they aren't quite successful. So my advice would be talk your neighbor into putting in a Citra Blue lawn, and if it's still good in a couple of years, do it yourself. But
There you go.
Floratam right now, if you want a nice green uniform lawn, not easy to maintain, but looks good when it is maintained correctly, is a good choice. Takes a lot of water. There's some other things. We'll discuss the problems with Floratam a little bit later. So with that, we move to the pasture grasses. These grasses, the Bahia grass, Argentine, and Pensacola. The Pensacola, when it produces seed heads, and there's a picture of the little V that Bahia grasses produce. Pensacola seed heads are male and female flowers. So every time they unite and produce a seed, the seed is a mixture of two parents. It doesn't necessarily mean that the seeds will reproduce exactly like the parent plant. And Pensacola produces more seeds. It is not as uniform as Argentine. It's not quite as good grass. It's a fantastic pasture grass. If you've got animals and you want something out in the pasture, Pensacola is great. The Bahia grasses tend to pop seeds up as soon as they're sheared off, and that means that as an animal goes through and eats away the plants, they produce seeds to replace themselves. Argentine is a much more uniform Bahia grass. It seeds are all clones of the parent, and it reproduces a very uniform grass. Both of these varieties are much happier in Florida in their native condition. They survive very well with no watering. The fertility of the soil here allows them to survive. If you don't want to do any lawn maintenance except mow it, Bahia grass is a good choice. It's not quite as pretty in most situations, but it is a nice grass and makes a good lawn, and it's easy to take care of. So although it's the #2 choice, most people that have it pick it because they don't have to do as much.
Right, I have Bahia grass and weeds, freedom lawn, and I was away for 10 days. And they tell me it rained almost the entire time I was gone. But so when I pulled up, I was glad to see, wow, look at all the Bahia grass I still have. I could tell that because of the seed heads. So, and then I went and mowed it. This is the, we don't have a lot of this in Hernando County, this Zoysia grass. And as I mentioned, it's kind of popular in the villages. What do you have to say about the Zoysia grass? And I only chose the Empire variety because that is the most common used variety for a lawn for homeowners.
Zoysia grass, for the most part, is not super happy in Florida. Empire is a variety that tends to do reasonably well. The biggest problem with Zoysia is that it has every one of the problems that St. Augustine has, and a couple of more. There's an insect that attacks Zoysia grass. The same funguses attack it. If you want it to be healthy, you need to use a much better lawnmower than you do with the other grasses. So I would not normally recommend it to somebody unless they really wanted that particular look. Empire is a tough grass to really make it happy. We were involved with some early Empire plots in this community, and they weren't really satisfactory. They would have been better off with St. Augustine. But this goes back to the villages has a tremendous number of lawns that are in Zoysia. The people that are taking care of the lawns do a great job of taking care of Zoysia because that's what they've grown up with. If those people had only a few St. Augustine lawns, they would have the same problems that we have with Zoysia. It depends on what the people that are taking care of the lawns understand and know. And the commercial people here know St. Augustine and Bahia kind of. And when you get out of their comfort zone, you're either going to have to do it yourself or you're going to suffer from some of the problems that neglected lawns suffer from. We'll cover a little more of that later.
And Zoysia grass is actually the opposite of everything we're going to tell you about St. Augustine and Bahia in the height of mowing. I know the Sumter County horticulture agent complains she can't get people to mow their Zoysia grass low enough. And to us, that sounds counterproductive because for St. Augustine and Bahia, it's about mowing higher for a healthy stand of grass. So Bernie, of these three that we spoke of, or even let's throw Bermuda out there or whatever, which turf is the best?
That is a personal question. The answer to that is, what do you want? What's in the neighborhood? Do you want to look like your neighbors? The easiest one to take care of is definitely Bahia. If you really don't mind spending a lot of time and want a lawn that looks nice and nicely uniform, then St. Augustine's probably the easiest one to have the really good lawn, but it's the most work. Most people really don't take care of it properly and don't want to learn. And so it's a toss-up. I would recommend using Bahia where it's possible because of the water, but we'll discuss that in a little later also.
Okay, so I know you get people that bring lawn samples in, and one of the questions you ask is, how much sun does it get? How important is sun to a stand of turf grass?
Well, it's one of those things where the absolute minimum for a really healthy lawn is 6 hours, and that's for some varieties of St. Augustine. The less sunlight you get, the more the grass tends to fade. So if you have 4 hours of sunlight in an area, it may take 4 years or 5 years, but that grass will deteriorate, and at some point it becomes almost impossible to sustain the grass in that area. It's not a case of it dies overnight, but why would you spend the money to put in a lawn that is not going to have enough sunlight to maintain it? So the areas where you don't have enough sunlight, do something besides sod. You don't need grasses everywhere. And just remember, you really want 8 hours. If you can't get 8 hours, the more you go down from there, the shorter the lifetime of your lawn is going to be.
Okay, and I always have to add this in since I am from the water department, and we are under 1 day a week watering restrictions. It goes by your address. Somebody mentioned on Facebook that she thinks people are trying to find a loophole since it doesn't say anything specific on this graphic about weekends. They think they can water on the weekends. It actually means the opposite. Since you don't see weekends here, if you see anybody watering on the weekend, they are violating the watering restrictions. Another thing is, it was brought to my attention by a master gardener that the community that she lives in, they didn't show the specific graphic, but they put the watering restrictions in their community, and they were correct by day and address. There was only one little word they had different, and that was up here. That word, they had that as an and instead of an or. And that, really changes things. That means you can try and water 2 watering cycles, and code enforcement is not necessarily going to, listen to you saying, but my newsletter said. So my boss, the water resource manager, did get a hold of that newsletter editor, and they said that they would, make a correction for October's newsletter. So just be careful. If you have any questions, give us a call, 352-754-4705. Before I talk to Bernie about the 1 day a week watering, I'm just going to let you know, the county's going through the budget process right now, so it's not 100%, sure thing. Our new budget year starts on October 1st, and I don't even remember when the budget, in the next week or two, it's going to be finalized. But what we are working on is having 2 new code enforcement officers. They work for code enforcement, but we kind of sponsor them at Hernando County Utilities. And their entire jobs will be watching out for these watering violations. And they will work weekends and they will work evenings. spread the word to your neighbors. This is happening, coming in the next couple of weeks. Bernie, what about all those who say, and I run into this every day, but my lawn can't live on 1 day a week watering?
That's not true, but I'll explain why. We've got a segment on irrigation. When we get to that, I'll explain why the 1 day a week thing works if everything else is done correct. Well, 1 day a week is the minimum for about 3 months out of the year in our area, and other than that, that's more than sufficient.
Okay. So what are you doing? What are you doing with your lawn? And I'm sure you get this question all the time, Bernie. How long should I leave each irrigation zone on?
Well, 3/4 of an inch of water will moisten the soil to a depth of 1 foot. So the answer is you should leave the water on till you get 3/4 of an inch. Now, your neighbor will come over and tell you, oh, that's 20 minutes. Hook up this thing, just a little timer, and water for 20 minutes. And in one zone, 20 minutes gives you 1.5 inches, and in another zone, it gives you 1/4 of an inch, and in another zone, it may give you 1/2 inch. And so using time makes absolutely no sense at all. The thing that you need to do is find out how long each zone takes to put down 3/4 of an inch of water. If you put down less than that, you don't water enough. If you put down more than that, you must have deep pockets because you're paying for water that you're throwing away. Use some little cans, straight-sided cans, measure it, and find out. And if it rains, you don't need to run the sprinkler system at all. If God gives you 3/4 of an inch of rain, that's free money. Take your money, put it in your pocket. Don't waste it giving it to Lilly's group. They don't mind at all. They really enjoy people not paying them as long as you don't owe them. So it's a case of don't overwater. Overwatering absolutely does no good. The only thing that benefits from overwatering is a little plant called dollarweed, and we'll talk about that also. But if it rains, you should have automatic shut off on your sprinkler system so that you don't water. And water is important. You know, if you water the plant every day, and then you stop watering it, the plant is so used to that they actually go into shock from not being watered.
Because you had a very shallow root system, you almost had a hydroponic lawn if you're doing it. Yes.
The number one disease of lawns requires water, and the number one problem is fungal, and fungus requires some warm temperatures, some water, and it's happier in the dark. So if you're watering at night and in the summer, you're just setting the lawn up for disease. You're not really benefiting. So water where you're done as late in the morning as possible. Water
8 a.m. 8 a.m. is as late as possible.
Water so that the everybody gets 3/4 of an inch. Adjust the timing on the various zones so that you put down 3/4 of an inch. Do it once a week unless it rains, and everybody will be happy. You'll have some extra money. You can go out and buy yourself something a little nicer, and you can sit back in your chair and look at the lawn and say it's doing good, and I'm responsible. So
I always tell people that I'm one of the few people in the world who gets paid to convince people to use less of my company's product. But it's because it's a finite resource, you know, and I mean, yes and no. We have the same water that we have always had since the beginning of time, but its availability as fresh water is limited due to, at certain places at certain times, and same water, way more people. You just need to keep that in mind too. This picture up here, these footprints, that's your lawn telling you, I'm dehydrated. So the next time I'm due to, have my water turned on, could you please do so if it doesn't rain in the meantime? And I like that you touched on the rain, because I'm trying to change people's minds somehow or another. We've got this backwards. You move to Florida, you've got to have an irrigation system. I don't have one, you don't have one, but that's what people think. And they think, you must use it as much as you're allowed to, or go ahead and cheat a little. That's what a lot of people do. Remember, I
Yeah.
mentioned those 2 new officers are coming. But they think, and then if it rains, oh, great, look, it supplemented my irrigation. That is so backwards.
An interesting thing with St. Augustine is if you can envision that the leaf is like a book, the mid vein being the spine of the book. When it's got plenty of water, the book is open, and as the book closes, it indicates that it has less and less water. Well, if the angle of the book is less than 90 degrees, the lawn is showing you that it needs water. But if it's still open, there's no reason to water. It's got plenty of water. I've seen them where the thing would dry out really quick, and the leaves would almost totally close up, just like it was a book. That's a lawn that needs some water. But that would happen, like it would start out in the morning and the leaves would be open at 90 degrees, and at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the leaves would be almost closed up. If they're opened up again in the morning, that's just daytime dry out. But if they're still closed in the morning, that's a lawn that indicates it needs to be watered. And you don't see that a lot. The water that we get during the summer from the rains pretty well takes care of things, with one exception, and we'll cover that in a little bit.
Okay. And I am so stealing that book analogy. I hope you know that. I like that. Now let's talk about fertilization, because fertilization is a big issue when people over fertilize. Not only do your lawn's only going to use what your lawn can use. It's only going to suck up the nutrients that it is capable of utilizing. And what happens to the rest is not a good thing. So your questions, I'm sure that you often get, are how often should I fertilize? What should I use? And when should I lime my lawn?
Well, I love those questions because that third one, you know how I feel on it. But anyway, how often should I fertilize? It depends. If you have a St. Augustine lawn and you leave the clippings on the lawn when you mow, twice a year is plenty. If you have a Bathauer lawn and you leave the clippings on, and you're happy with the lawn, you don't ever have to fertilize.
I'll say about once every 10 years.
Yeah, well,
the pattern I got into.
if you fertilize the lawn takes off and grows. So there are actually times when fertilizing the lawn is not really a good thing. How often should I fertilize a Bathauer lawn? If you really want a lawn that looks like what he's pushing the fertilizer spreader through, and Bathauer twice a year would be more than adequate. The trick on fertilizer is to use a slow release fertilizer. Our recommendation is to use a 15-0-15. Now, 15-0-15 is kind of hard to find. The numbers on fertilizer that represent nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. The commercial people put down a fertilizer that contains a lot of nitrogen, and maybe it's got phosphorus, maybe it doesn't, depends on the area they're in and whether there's an ordinance against it. And then they throw little potassium in. Well, the nitrogen is to make the blades grow. If you use a lot of nitrogen, you see things happen, and if you see things happen, you think you're getting your money's worth and you pay the people, and you never realize what's actually going on in the lawn. The phosphorus, we have normally so much phosphorus in the soil that you don't need to add additional. The thing that happens is if there's not enough phosphorus, the lawn turns a pinkish color. I've seen that twice in 17 years. And then potassium. Potassium is necessary for a healthy root structure. And the truth is, the root structure is probably more important than the blade. So we recommend that you use a fertilizer that has the same amount of potassium as it has nitrogen, and that they be slow release, so that instead of giving the lawn a big jolt and putting it in to grow as fast as it possibly can mode, that over the 4 or 5 months between fertilization, this slowly releases nutrients and allows the lawn to grow slower. It does several things, because a lawn that's heavily growing is under stress. It reduces the stress. Second, because it's not growing so often, St. Augustine is a runner grass. And the little runners, if you're really making it grow, you can make those runners go 18 inches a season. Well, if every grass blade is running 18 inches a season, those little runners get really thick. And you walk on the lawn and it feels like you're walking on a sponge.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have those kind of lawns, that's because they've been over fertilized. And when that happens, you start having diseases in the lawn. It's a bad thing to over fertilize. If you don't fertilize, it won't die. If you over fertilize, you put it on its death march. So do not over fertilize. Use a slow release fertilizer. Do not use liquid fertilizers. These guys that come out and spray your lawn every month with a fertilizer, they've put it into permanent grow mode. That is not a good thing. That's not what you want. So use a balanced, slow release fertilizer. And when should I lime my lawn? Just as soon as you move back north, because that's one thing you're never going to have the need to do in Florida. Lawns do best when they're slightly acidic. When you lime them here, they are no longer acidic. The idea of using lime is to move acid soil to a higher pH. We do not want to do that. Our pH is always high. A lot of times it's too high. Adding lime makes it too high, makes it worse. So
And Bathauer grass particularly does not like a high pH.
no, Bathauer grass, all these lawns do well under certain conditions. Remember, none of these lawns really want to be here. We have trained these lawns to grow in our conditions. And when you put lime down, you're training them to be up north. And what they do is they die. They don't fall over dead. You know, it's not an immediate thing, but it's a slow thing. And the decline is slow enough that people never realized that it was their bad decisions that caused it. But anyway, do not lime your lawn.
All right. And we do have a fertilizer ordinance here in Hernando County. And people wonder, why do we have it in the winter when the southern counties, you'll hear on the news, June, July, August, there's a blackout time when homeowners can fertilize their lawns. Due to the stormwater runoff, it makes sense. Why Hernando County decided to do it in January, February, and March is we used the advice of a turf expert, Dr. Lori Trinholm at the University of Florida, as well as a few others, stating that yes, it rains a lot in the summer, but the lawn is actively growing and the lawn can utilize the proper amount of fertilizer if you fertilize it absolutely appropriately. In the winter, your lawn is not actively growing. It will not take up any nutrients. Well, it'll either do a couple of things. Either it will take it up and you have a lawn, as Bernie said, a stressed lawn, but especially stressed because of the weather and the lack of daylight hours, and you're forcing it to grow. And you might have some tender new growth that'll get zapped in a freeze. That, or it's just in its semi-dormancy and it's not doing anything. It won't take it up, doesn't have much of a root system during the winter. And that is either going to have a rain and that fertilizer will get washed down the street to the nearest waterway, or it'll leach right into our aquifer. So in the interest of time, we're going to pass over that short explanation and have Bernie tell us about a soil test. Should I get a soil test for my lawn before I decide to fertilize it?
Well, everybody should do a soil test at least once. The pH of your soil is very critical. The thing about it is, if you did a soil test and you've got a Bathauer lawn, the soil test comes back and it says your pH is 5.8, you got it made. Everything's going to be fine and it won't be a problem. But if the soil test comes back and says it's 7.1, that Bathauer lawn is going to slowly die off. And it may take 5 years, but I guarantee you that if you've got a Bathauer lawn and a high pH, that lawn will eventually look like trash. So, but you could slow that down, or you could even solve that problem. So if you do the soil test and you know where you are to start with, you know what nutrients are high and plenty of abundance. You know whether you're going to have to do a lot of fertilizing. You know whether or not you're going to have to do some amendments, which don't normally work all that well, but could. You know, you might need a little elemental sulfur with your Bathauer, or you might need a little different fertilizer with your St. Augustine, but you need to know that. Once you know that, unless you make some big changes, probably I wouldn't worry about it again. Maybe 5 years or maybe 10 years, but initially you need to know where you are to start. It's just like do you do a blood test because you got a problem every year when you go to the doctor, or do you do a blood test to find out if you got a problem? So what we're doing this soil test for is to find out if we've got a problem. This is a preventative thing, not a curative thing.
And how does one go about doing a soil test?
Well, the university has a wonderful machine that they basically stick these things in one end, and out pops this fantastic printed report at the other. I'm not even sure exactly what the mechanics are, but that's what happens. It comes in one door in the building, it goes out in the mail. So
we watched it. We went up and toured the lab.
You can get the little bag from the extension office in the form, and just send them up to the university. Costs $10 for a complete test. I mean, it's a bargain. They tell you everything you never wanted to know about soil, more than that. And they tell you things, you know, they tell you if you might need lime, you know, that there might be somebody in the world that does.
I have always said that if somebody has a soil test from Central Florida stating they need lime, email it to me, show it to me, and I will eat a bug online.
But a soil test is a good thing to have, and
Yeah.
do it once. Of course, like I say, it's $10. It's wonderful. Get the form and a little bag
Go
from
to
the
your
extension office.
local extension office, which, for two of you listening, that is the Hernando County Extension Office. Go in there, ask them for the kit. You will mail it to the University of Florida. Buddy will go to the Leon County Extension Office, ask for the kit. You mail it to the University of Florida. The university will send you your results. They send your county extension office an exact duplicate of your results. So call back on a Thursday if you're in Hernando County, because Bernie just loves to go over those soil tests with you and explain to you what they're saying. Okay, Bernie, see this problem with this lawn here? Bugs are killing my lawn. My lawn is dying. So what kind of insecticide should I spray?
Well, there again, that is one of those where your neighbor looks over the yard and says, "You've got chinch bugs." The odds are that it's not a bug killing your lawn. Maybe 1 out of 100 times or 1 out of 1,000 times. It might be insect related, but it's so uncommon that you should not be spraying an insecticide till you know what the bug is and why you're spraying the insecticide. So if you're not capable of going out and getting on your knees and finding it, take a sample to your extension office, call them and ask them exactly how they want it sampled. Take them in a sample and find out if you really have an insect. The thing that happened in Hernando County is originally the problem with St. Augustine was chinch bugs. So everybody in the lawn care business learned that if you had a spot showing up in the lawn, it was a chinch bug. All the neighbors learned that they could look over the fence and say, "Charlie, you got chinch bugs." And when I first started doing this, people would bring lawn samples in, and in a square foot sample, I would have 10 chinch bugs and a couple of big-eyed bugs and some earwigs and a grub and all kinds of life, some ants, and it was a little kingdom running around in there. All these little critters were alive. And I can't think of the word. Anyway, if you didn't have at least 25 chinch bugs per square foot, they weren't the problem. It took a lot of chinch bugs to cause the damage. But initially, people would come in and I would hit the target. I would find 20 in a square foot, and they started spraying insecticide. And they sprayed and they sprayed and they sprayed. No matter what happened to the lawn, they sprayed. They sprayed for chinch bugs. And to this day, all those people that were in the lawn care business before spray for chinch bugs. The next door neighbor still looks over the fence and says, "You got chinch bugs." So we have put 1 million tons of insecticide on the lawns here. There isn't anything alive moving in the ground in Hernando County anymore. People bring a sample in. I have not seen a chinch bug in 4 years. And that was one sample that had 3 bugs. And those 3 chinch bugs are the only 3 I've seen probably in 10 years now. I mean, there are no insects out there really going to town on the lawns. That's not a problem. So when you start thinking you've got insects, before you spray, find out what insect it is. Do not spray indiscriminately. We have poisoned our water. Every bit of that went in the water system. So it's just hard to imagine how many hundreds and thousands of gallons of insecticide were sprayed and are continuing to be sprayed when that's not the problem. There's a lot of things that cause that. That's another thing we'll talk about in a little bit.
Not
That's
always-
not the bad guy.
Yes. So what about weeds? I don't mind weeds. Like I said, I have what's called a freedom lawn. If it's green and mowable, looks good at 30 miles an hour. That's our mantra. But there are people, and you know, sometimes it's the community you live in is intolerant of any weed activity in your yards. So I know you get lots of questions about weeds. So tell us a little bit about weeds in your lawn.
All right. Weeds are one of those things that most of them are easy to control. The normal procedure for weeds would be to put down a pre-emergent. Pre-emergent, you do that in this early spring or maybe in early February. And pre-emergent doesn't kill anything. All it does is stop the seeds from germinating. So if you have a crabgrass is an annual. It grows from seed. So if you go in and you use a pre-emergent, you can stop the crabgrass. Pre-emergents usually take 2-3 years before you get rid of everything. You know, if you start out, you've got 100,000 crabgrass seeds, and you spray a pre-emergent, and you kill 90% of those seeds, or stop 90% of them from germinating. That leaves 10% that are still capable of germinating. That's a lot of plants that can come up and produce more seed. So the next year you kill 90%, and now we're getting down to where we kind of got control. And the next year, when you kill them, it pretty much takes them out of the picture. So if you're going to use pre-emergent and get rid of the annuals, plan on it being like a 3-year project. And depending on the weeds, you may want to go a couple of times in the spring, or maybe once in the spring, once in the fall, to get rid of some fall annuals. But pre-emergent is the nicest thing because you're not killing anything, you're not dealing in poisons. Broadleaf weeds are the easiest to get rid of. The only thing you have to be aware of is that, as a general rule, the broadleaf weed killers that work in St. Augustine tend to damage Bahia. And the ones that work in Bahia tend to damage St. Augustine. So make sure that when you buy this weed killer for southern lawns, that you find out which southern lawn. Someplace on the label is going to tell you, or it'll do things like usable on all southern lawns except Loratan. So be absolutely positive that in the label that it's acceptable for the type of grass that you have. Grassy weeds are the nightmare. Those are the guys that present serious problems, because if it's a grassy weed, things that are going to kill grasses kill grasses. So if the weed happens to be a grass you don't like, and you go put something on it that kills that, it probably is going to kill your lawn. So be warned. Sedges, they look kind of like grasses, but they have triangular stems. The little saying is sedges have edges.
Edges, yes.
So sedges take a chemical that is specific for them. It used to be I could recommend Image, and that would work fine, but now Image has a complete lawn package, and they're all called Image. So if you want to buy something for sedges, Sedge Hammer is a good product. Image for sedges is a good product. Those are fine. The annuals, pre-emergents work good on those. Biennials, those generally, some of the broadleaf weed killers take them out. Occasionally you need to get the weeds identified and look for specific product for that particular weed. There's a product, MSM, that works fantastic on weeds. It only works in St. Augustine lawns. It damages oak trees. It 100% zaps Bathauer grass. So a lot of times, if you go and say, I got some weeds in my front yard, they will sell you MSM, and it's a fantastic product. But don't use it if you have oak trees, and don't use it if you have Bathauer. Man, there is nothing that takes out Bathauer quicker. That's one of the few exceptions where you could take out a grass in a, if you have Bathauer grass as a weed in your St. Augustine, MSM will get rid of. But for the most part, you can just go check with the extension agent. Take your problem weed, say, what product do I need to get rid of this? Good lawn care will keep the weed count down considerably. And there again, we're going to talk about that when we get to the mowing heights thing.
Yeah. And you said you were going to talk about this dollar weed down here on the bottom right.
Dollar weed is a product of overwatering. If you don't have a wet spot for an extended period of time, you probably don't have dollar weed. Dollar weed, there are some specific products to take that out. That's a very difficult thing to get rid of. It's a very easy thing to avoid. It's usually associated with people that have irrigation systems and cheat.
Mm-hmm.
They overwater, and then the next thing you know, they've got dollar weed, and that's a problem. And
they don't know they're outing themselves when they come to it.
And it is a problem, but it's a great indicator. So if they come out and those guys are saying, we caught you cheating, and you say, oh no, it couldn't have been me, and your lawn's got dollar weed all over it, or in big areas,
I know, unfortunately, we can't use that. You have to be caught actually doing the watering, but it likes wet areas. I took pictures of dollarweed on the shoreline in a lake underwater. Dollarweed likes water. So again, you mentioned mowing. So how low should I mow?
This is the biggest problem that there is today with lawns. And I need to explain something first that is going to make people understand what's happening. The height of the blade determines how long the root's going to be. All these different lawns have some optimum amount of blade that's going to feed an optimum amount of root system. So in St. Augustine, in Floritam, it's 4 inches. It takes a 4-inch blade to support a healthy root system. That doesn't mean that if the blade's shorter, that the grass won't be healthy, but it'll be under stress. And the reason is, let's go back to the irrigation. We put 3/4 of an inch of water down. We watered to a depth of a foot. We've been mowing our lawn at 2 inches high all along. The lawn looks great. Now, when you mow at 2 inches, the root structure is only 1.5 inches to 2 inches long. So that means that all the moisture that plant can get has got to be in the top 2 inches of soil. If we have a rain or whatever the water situation is, we've completely filled our soil. Now the first day, what part of that soil is going to dry first? The very top. So the first day we lose 3/4 of an inch of moisture in the top part of the soil. The second day we lose 3/4 of an inch in the top part of the soil. The third day we lose 3/4 of an inch. Now our lawn that we've been mowing at 2 inches high, after 3 days, no longer has root structure down into where the moisture is. And it goes into a water shock problem. And it's going to be under shock until it gets some more water. Now, do we water when we're not supposed to? Because this is definitely a water problem. Or do we start out and mow at 4 inches, and at 4 inches, the root structure will go between 6 and 8 inches long? Think about that.
Mhm.
If you mow at 2 inches, the roots are only 1.5 to 2 inches long. If you mow at 4 inches, the roots are 6 to 8 inches long. So if the soil dries at 3/4 of an inch a day, the grass that's been mowed at 4 inches has a root structure that picks up water with no problems for a week and a half. So
Mhm.
we have all the problems associated with water because of mow height. So is mow height important? Mow height is the most important thing in lawn care. The way that golf courses get by with mowing at 3/8 of an inch high in Bermuda is that 300, that particular Bermuda will support a root structure at 3/4 of an inch if it's given everything it needs every day. So they have somebody that every day goes out and works on the greens.
Mhm.
Now, if you're going to do 2-inch mowing with St. Augustine, you're going to have some big water buckets and something that you can go out and take care of that, because it's not legal in our county to water more than 1 day a week. And at 2 inches, God does not provide the care that it needs. So you will not get enough rain if you mow it short. Okay, so you mow it short, and it's always under stress. The county has a fungus that's really common. It's called take-all root rot. Take-all root rot and grass live together, and they're happy and nothing happens as long as the grass is healthy. But when the grass is stressed, take-all root rot can attack the grass. So with the guy with the 4-inch tall blades never knows about the problem. The guy with the 2-inch tall blades, once we start getting this water up, water down level in the soil, and the grass is under tremendous stress, the take-all root rot attacks it and really goes after it. So it's not a big problem during the rainy season, but just before the rainy season and just after the rainy season, take-all goes berserk. 99.99% of all the lawn problems in Hernando County are take-all root rot. Most of them could have been avoided by mowing at 4 inches. Very few mowers have the ability to mow at 4 inches. So you either have to make little extensions to lower the wheels so that you can raise the mower, or you have to buy a mower specifically, or you're going to mow it too short. At 3.5 inches, you get about a 6-inch roots. Anything less than 3.5 inches, the roots shorten up like you could not believe. People bring these soil samples in. The fungus has just totally destroyed them. I put them under a microscope, man. It's so obvious that they're just riddled with fungus, and we have this root that's only that long. which is an indication that they've been mowed short forever and ever and ever and ever. Remember, this thing puts out a runner that, when it's healthy, runs 18 inches in a season. So it goes 4 inches, it puts down another blade, it goes 4 inches, it puts down another blade, and so on and so on. So that every time it puts up a blade, it puts down roots underneath that blade. So it doesn't take long. You know, at the end of the season, half the grass you see, if you've mowed it short, has got a very short root system. You do that a couple of years, you have no roots, and as soon as it dries out, boom, you got a problem. Now, while we're into this and the root structure, let's go back and pick up on the Bathauer grass. Bathauer, each one of those little grasses is an individual. So if one individual dies, you lose a spot in the lawn. The thing that normally happened with Bathauer was it was in a pasture. The cows came along, they munched on it, it put up a seed head. The seed head had an opportunity for the seeds to mature. The seeds would fall down. The germination rate was terrible, but we only need to replace one little plant, and it would replace one little plant, and the Bathauer would stay healthy and everything was fine. With lawns, as soon as you mow the grass, it thinks the cows went through, it puts up seed heads. So overnight, all these little seed heads pop up. You look out, you say, damn, I just mowed that lawn, and look at that, it's a mess. And you run out and you mow all the seed heads down. So, and while you're out running around, you stepped on one of those little seeds, one of those little grass shoots, and you killed one. So we lost a few just because we were doing lawn maintenance. And we eliminated its recovery by mowing off all the seed heads. So works wonderful if you're the county, you plant Bathauer along the road, the guys come by, they mow, the seed heads pop up, they've got 2 weeks to mature and everything, and they replant themselves. And 3 weeks later, we come by and we mow again, and we just keep recycling the grass. It makes itself happy. We could do that in the lawns, but we don't. You know, if you leave all the seed heads standing up, your neighbors complain. A lot of people don't like it. They wouldn't do it. So if you don't reseed occasionally, overseed, your Bathauer lawn is going to slowly decay out. Bathauer needs to be mowed at 3.5 inches to produce a healthy system. The thing about it is, because it's not a real tight pattern, if it's less than 3.5 inches, it will not shade out the weeds. And if you have one of these little guys die, you have a spot now that a weed's going to take over. It's pretty much any place in Florida that you expose the soil to the sun, and a weed pops up. So the higher you mow your Bathauer, and the more it'll keep the weeds down. If the more often you mow your Bathauer and get rid of the seed heads, the shorter the time will be before the grass finally succumbs. I mean, this is not a thing where you notice it happen. It's not a 1 year and my lawn really looks bad. It's over a 5-year period of time. Your lawn just deteriorates and doesn't look quite as good. The number of weeds will come up. The overall health of the lawn goes down. So mow it high. Either let the seed heads stand for a couple of weeks once in a while, or overseed. And Bathauer does pretty well if you do that. But therein is why the mowing height is important. The mowing height determines the root structure. The root structure depth determines how long it gets water. It's a long story, but it's important.
Yes, it is very important. And thank you for all that. I learned some information there as well. So what about, see, this lawnmower here has a bag. What about, should we bag up our clippings? You mentioned already letting the clippings just go back to the lawn, and you can skip a couple fertilizations, at least one fertilization a year.
If you, St. Augustine grass really needs to be fertilized. If you bag the clippings with St. Augustine, you can make up for it with fertilization. Bahia, if you bag the clippings and get rid of them, basically you need to fertilize it occasionally with the Bahia, because every time you take that set of clippings off, you're taking nutrients out of the system. If you let the clippings stay, you don't lose any nutrition out of the ground. The clippings are not thatch, by the way. Everybody worries about thatch. Well, the clippings decay if you mow the lawn any reasonable frequency. The clippings are small enough that they don't lay on top of the grass and stop the grass from photosynthesizing. But the little clippings fall down the lawn. They disintegrate and return the nutrients to the soil. That's great.
Okay, so let's move to our next question. You talked a lot already about take all root rot, so I think we will leave that. Gray leaf spot, you occasionally get that, and brown patch disease is pretty much a zoysia. Isn't that a zoysia grass? Yeah. So if your lawn looks kind of like this and you're concerned, could I have this take all root rot Bernie was referring to? You need to bring him a sample and go to like here, so you get half good, half bad. Otherwise, Bernie, if you bring him this, he's going to tell you you have a dead lawn. That's it. So bring where there's the line of demarcation is occurring, and as he mentioned, he can look under the microscope. He knows what those spores look like now of take all root rot. Bring, what do you prefer, like a 12 by 12 square?
I like to say about the size of the shoebox.
Okay.
So that half of it is green area, half of it's dead. The truth is, if I could get one runner that is green on one end, dead on the other, I can pretty well tell. It is so common at this point that if you even need to ask, you've got it.
Right.
It's that prevalent.
And how much do you charge for that diagnosis, Bernie?
That's free. We don't charge for any of our things here.
Okay. So your lawn could be sick, could have that take all root rot. As we're wrapping up, what do you tell people that have a lawn service and they're kind of like, oh, they just do their thing, I don't know, they're almost afraid to approach them?
Well, the thing about it is, you need to ask. We have these wonderful rulers, by the way. These are compliments of Lilly. They have a little star where it says 6 inch. And if you stop by at our office or at Lilly's office, we'll give you a free ruler. And you take your ruler out to the lawn service and you say, I want my lawn mowed at 4 inches. And if he won't do it, and he's going to damage your lawn, why are you still paying him? You are the boss. The person that pays has the right to determine what the things are going to be. And it really annoys me that people will let these companies get by with murder. They have somebody come by every month and put something on the lawn, but they don't know what. But it must be the right thing, because these are guys that are reputable coming by and doing that. I mean, they're as reputable as any other thing, like used car salesmen, aluminum siding people. I'm sure there are good people out there, but what if you happen to have the bad one? Don't be afraid to ask them what they did, and they should have no qualms telling you what they did. and tell them what heights you want. And I've had these people say, well, you know, we have an HOA, and the HOA hires the guy, and I can't do anything about it. And I said, okay, who's going to pay for the new sod when your lawn dies? Well, I have to pay for that. I said, well, then why don't you go to somebody and make sure that you're getting the lawns mowed? The number one killer of St. Augustine lawns is improper mowing height. Number one. I mean, by a factor, it's 2/3 of all the St. Augustine lawn problems start with mow height. So, I mean, if you could cut your chance of having to resod, you know, that's a $3,000 to $6,000 cost. You know, if you don't mind spending that every 3 years, fine. But I would not want to budget $3,000 or $6,000 to have my lawn resodded. That just seems stupid, especially when raising the height of the mower solves the problem. So if the guy on the tractor doesn't want to do it and you're paying him, don't use him again, get somebody else. There are probably 300 or 400 people in this county that do lawn mowing. Every man that's out of a job and has a pickup truck gets himself a mower and goes into the lawn mowing business. It's funny. Some of them are very, very ethical people and will try very, very hard to please and do what's right. Some of them are only doing this until we get another job. So just remember, you pay, you're the boss, 4 inches minimum.
So we are running out of time, but if there's an area, we'll just say this quickly, where grass just absolutely refuses to grow, just stop forcing it. You know, maybe there's not enough sun, maybe the soil isn't correct. There are lots of alternatives for that area, ground covers, put a patio there, create a plant bed there. You know, we have classes on alternatives. And here's the Freedom Lawn that I spoke of. And I was thinking of it when you were talking about anytime you expose the soil, weeds will come up. So this is the lot next to us that my husband and I purchased. And this front half literally was just some exposed soil because he did a little clearing. We did not put this green stuff there. It is some sort of grassy weed that put itself there. Now over here, it's harder to see, you know, our real lawn is Bathauer and a mixture of weeds, but this is in August, green and nice enough for me. And we have a class coming up on Freedom Lawns in a few weeks. So here's our question for you. With everything we discussed, do you think lawns are sustainable for our future?
Do I?
Yeah. What's your opinion on that?
Well, I think if people would just learn to take care of them, lawns are not really a problem. We don't need anywhere near as much grass as we've got. I think as this county gets more crowded, people are going to want more areas that aren't in grass. But we'll have grass forever and ever, if for no other reason than all the researchers that are getting paid trying to come up with the next great grass.
I believe this guy here, or probably even his parents, aren't going to be as interested in obsessing over lawns as we are. But
No.
as you said, the Freedom Lawns, they doing it right, just mowing it correctly, you know. Lawns serve a very specific, you know, purpose. I have, you know, met people who have said Florida friendly is great and lawns can be Florida friendly. That's why we discuss it. But really all I want out of life is it to cover that area, and I want to mow it and move on with my life. And I don't want to have to mess with a bunch of other flowers. That's an option out there. All that we want is to not be putting all the chemical and water inputs. in these lawns. So I think our attitude about lawns are going to change, but they'll still have a place in the future. Here's some of the resources where you can find information about your Florida lawn. If you go to this link at the University of Florida, you will be lost down a rabbit hole, because there is you know, a Florida lawn guide through there. Every subject we just spoke of and more will be covered through there. If you want to see the watering restrictions, I have the link for that, as well as the Unicode for the Hernando County Fertilizer Ordinance. And as I said, you can email me if you want a copy of a PDF copy of this program. Here's our upcoming classes. Yes, what is today? I'm totally lost. Today's the 21st, so this is next week. Dr. Lester and I will be back with part 2 of a look at natural products for pest control. And then through October, we have these upcoming classes. And here's the one I mentioned on the 19th, Let Freedom Lawns Ring, where Dr. Lester and I will cover more about that particular subject. Here are all my social media platforms where you can find out information about upcoming classes. If you go to Hernando County Government YouTube, this recording will be on it in a few days. In every class that I've done, and you will get to see classes. There's one called Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Your Florida Lawn. And we kind of covered this as Bernie did, but I broke it up into how much care do you want to do? You know, a lot, a medium amount, or a small amount. And this is the result you will get in a St. Augustine lawn for a lot, a medium, or a little. This is the result you will get for a Bathauer lawn for a little, a medium, a lot. And spoiler alert, the Bathauer lawns like that medium amount to get the most ideal amount. If you want to talk to Bernie, he'll be available tomorrow from what, about 9 to 3?
Yes.
At this phone number, 352-754-4433. We'll talk to you if you're out of county as well. But in Hernando, certainly. This is an email address for the Master Gardeners, hernandomg@ifas.ufl.edu. Now that is not regularly monitored every day because he is a volunteer. So if you want a quicker answer, drop a line to Dr. Lester here at wlester@ufl.edu. If he thinks it's something Bernie can handle, he'll send it to him, but that make sure that some eyes are on it that way. And here again is my email if you have any questions. So Bernie, I thank you very, very much for your expertise as always. I love sitting listening to Bernie talk. Many years ago, I worked for the county extension office in a clerical type program, assistant type mode. So I was every Thursday, we spent the whole day together, you know, with our desks near each other. So learned a lot from each other, learned a lot listening to him help the people who came in with questions. And we had a good time, and fortunately, we still get to have a good time. So thank you very much, Bernie. And thank you all for watching. And again, this should be available on Facebook by this afternoon and at Hernando County Government YouTube within a week or so, depending on how busy John is with other projects. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful Florida-friendly week.